Hi everybody, Mr. Natural here. I'm in Golden Gate Park near the Conservatory of Flowers, the northeast side of the park, just as you enter off of the Panhandle. Well, today I'd like to talk to Navayauvana about your violin. Hello, hi, namaste. The first thing I'd like to mention is that you're way overstretching your bow, my friend. All you need to do is make the strings on the bow just barely taut. There is a natural bowing downward of the bow, and if you tighten it so much that it gets straight, let alone go beyond, bending in the opposite direction, because it's a bow, it shouldn't look like a bow. Sorry about that. What I do is I just tighten it enough that it's barely taut, and I test it by bouncing it on my thumbnail. And if resting the bow on my thumbnail and giving it a slight bounce, if it doesn't touch the wood, that's taut enough. And if it does touch the wood, then I just tighten it a little bit more so I can bounce it comfortably without my thumbnail hitting the wood. The reason you don't want to overstretch it is a number of things. One, you're stretching the horsehair to the point where it won't hold any rosin, and it's harder to get it to vibrate the string, and harms the tone. It tends to slide. Another thing is you don't want to touch it or test the tautness with your finger, because your finger actually has some oil on it, and if the oil from your finger gets into the horsehair, then that spot won't take on rosin as well. There's also the area on the violin where you're bowing, and as you notice, as you move closer to the bridge, it gets brighter. Now, bright is okay, but not necessarily all that good. Bright, if it starts sounding like a metal or a heavy metal, or starts sounding like someone with a pair of shears cutting tin, that is not, that's too bright. That's not good. You'll notice that as you move closer to the bridge, that the first overtone that you begin to hear is the fifth. And the fifth is about as far as I would go. That's about as close to the bridge as I would get. Especially where you're at in India, they do like the brighter sound, and they do like the overtones, but it is the fifth overtone that rings out in the sitars and a lot of the instruments from the area that you're in. So I wouldn't play any closer to the bridge than that. Another problem with playing that close to the bridge is that it takes more energy to impact the string and get it to vibrate or to move. If you go in the opposite direction, however, towards the fingerboard, then what happens is you get too much of a fundamental, and the richness and brightness goes away. There's actually a place about halfway between the fingerboard and the bridge is a good place to start, and moving it a little bit more towards the bridge, but not too much more. And there's a buy-off between how much energy it takes to move the string. The closer you are to the fretboard, fingerboard, of course, the less energy it takes to move the string. And the further away or closer you are to the bridge, the more energy it will take to move the string. So you don't want to slip and slide. On the one hand, you want to get a rich, full tone. For your ear, you want to move it a little bit closer to the bridge, but not as close as you're going. You'll find that that's a lot. It squeaks and slides and moves around, and you lose quite a bit of control that way. The bow. I was hoping to get one of my students to demonstrate this, but they've been lazy. It's near the end of summer, and they're all running around on vacations and stuff, and I can't seem to pin one of them down. And when they come to their lesson, they want to take their lesson, and they don't want to spend time right now. So it might be a little while before I can tame one of those horses to take some time and demonstrate some of these things. But I just thought I would intervene right now, because I noticed in your last video you have your bow bent about 10 times more than it should be, and I'm afraid you'll actually do damage to the bow, and you're playing a little bit too high and too bright. It is nice that you're hearing the overtones and that you can pull them out. That's a good thing, to be able to control those things. And there are times when your fingers won't be able to go high enough to get those, and you want that brighter sound. But right now you're playing a little bit too close to the bridge to have any control. Another thing about the bow is pulling on the bow. There are actually two schools of thought. The classical school of thought is to take the thumb and push the thumb into the side of the bow and to span or work the hand outward like this across the bow to bring, some people bring it around, push the thumb in here and bring it around like this, curving the finger. Some people like to keep it flat. In the classical style, we take the little finger and put it at the end of the bow so we can lift the bow, and holding the bow with essentially these two fingers allows the bow to pivot, and the little finger allows us to raise up and raise up the pressure on the bow so it can be played softer, or letting it down and play. And when the hand is moved forward, we always start with the wrist moving towards the thing, then let the wrist move past, the fingers continue to go, and then we pull the wrist back, and then we get here, we push the fingers out and push the wrist forward. So always letting the wrist lead is one of the classical styles. In the Russian school of bowing, they don't do that at all. What they do is they try to get on top of or play above the violin. They imagine as if the violin is below their chin and they're looking down at the violin, and they're placing the bow onto the string, and then what they do is when they bow in, they actually rotate or lift the hand up to push it in, and then pull it down to pull it out. Lift the hand up so they're above the bow, and then pull it back out. So I've learned myself that, I've seen fiddle players in Kentucky not even go near the frog. The bottom end of where you're tuning, where you tighten it, is called the frog, and you usually put your thumb just a little bit in front of the frog. I've seen players who don't put their hand at the frog at all. They actually move their hand further up the bow, or even halfway up the bow, and fiddle. Different people will get different things going, but the important thing is that the weight of the bow and gravity itself will rest on the string and allow you to get a very nice stroke and beautiful soft tone. What I do in classes sometimes is I will just take and I'll go all the way to the end there where you have the little screw on the frog there that you're using to tune with. I'll just put my thumb back there and touch it like this, so it's just so the bow is just resting on the strings by itself with its own weight, and then just by pushing with my thumb and pulling back, I can show people how you get a really nice natural tone by just allowing the bow and the weight of the bow to rest on the violin. Another thing I've done to demonstrate this is to hold the bow absolutely still, letting the weight and gravity of the bow lean on the strings, and then I'll move the violin in and out. And without moving the bow at all, I can move the violin along the string, along the bow, like that, and then turn the violin to get the next string and move that way from string to string. And it's kind of funny to see someone holding the bow straight still and moving the violin, but it demonstrates how you can produce tone quite naturally by just using gravity and the normal mass of the bow. There's no reason to have to bear into it or to saw across it. So just allowing the bow and gravity to do its job, to get a beautiful tone, to move farther away from the bridge than you are now, to get both the overtones and the fundamental. If you get too high up and you get too many overtones, especially going past where you hear the fifth, then you're going to be suppressing the fundamental to the point where you don't get the richer, deeper wood-like tone. It gets too metally up there near the bridge. So I would suggest you move back on that just a little bit more than you are. Let's say about 30% to half, somewhere between halfway between the fretboard and the bridge, and 30% towards the bridge would be good for you. I know in India they do love that fifth, and if you can get just behind it, get up there until you hear the fifth coming out, and then get close till you hear the fifth coming out, and then move just behind it. So as you play, that bright fifth will ring out, and that will pretty much produce the type of tone that you're used to in your area. The other thing is a lot of violin practice can be done without the bow. I see you had a guitar. I suggest you get yourself a guitar pick. And one of the things I used to do to practice my fingering patterns is to hold the violin in my lap as if I were playing a guitar, and watch television. And then during the commercials, the 5 to 7 minutes of commercials we have these days, every 15 minutes on TV, I would simply mute the sound, and I would sit there and play my violin as if I were playing a guitar. And this allows you to play softly and pick sort of in a pizzicato sort of way around on the fretboard and get a really clean little tones, and can practice your left hand fingering technique. The thing about the area where the bow is going over the strings is on new violins quite often there's too much slipping and sliding. So another suggestion is on a new instrument to take the rosin and actually put rosin on the string. It will help the bow grab the string and get it to start vibrating. You don't have to rely on the rosin on the string. When you put rosin on the bow, another thing is after you put rosin all over the bow, some people tap the bow lightly to knock off the excess rosin. That's also a good thing. So you don't want to over rosin. After you've played the instrument for a while, quite often some people will take a cloth and wipe the rosin off of the violin. Old country players think there's something wonderful about the violin getting crusty. And so what they do is they actually they do not clean the top of the violin. They'll clean every other part of the violin, the fret, the fingerboard, and the back of the violin and sides of the violin, but they'll leave the rosin on there so it cakes up and looks kind of funky. And you'll notice in old fiddle players quite often they have a really rustic, funky looking thing. If the rosin stays on the wood for too long, it's hard to get off. So you have to go for that rustic look that makes you look like you've been playing violin forever, or just simply take a cloth and wipe it off. Now, wiping off the rosin, of course, is going to give the wood the best opportunity to vibrate and give you a good tone. So keeping the violin clean and the fretboard clean with the simple cloth is a good strategy, but as I said, it's again a matter of preference. I am from the old country school, and all of my violins are crusty as heck on the top and look like they've been played for years and years and years, even though I don't play that much anymore. My fingers can't bend my fingers anymore. I have to play things where I can play my fingers straight, because the arthritis in my joints doesn't allow me to bend and hook the tips of my fingers much. That area where you put rosin on the strings there, where the bow moves up and down, you do not want to touch that area with your fingers either, because the grease from your fingers can get in. Those strings are wound strings, and the grease from your fingers can get into the strings and then causes, again, a sliding problem. So again, when you do pluck the violin like a guitar, you use a pick. And I take a guitar pick and I put a little rosin on the tip of the guitar pick, and I sit there and just pick up and down. It makes it quiet, so you can do it, around at night, and you can do it in different areas, and you don't have to worry about disturbing people too much. It makes the notes kind of short and sweet and very staccato and detached, so you can hear them, little plosive pitches, so you can hear them better. And that's a good thing too. Another thing I discovered is if you take the edge of the pick, you'll notice that picks are in a sort of a triangle or a teardrop shape. What I do is I hold the long part of the pick where the tip normally goes, and I hold my thumb on it that way. And what I do is along that edge I put rosin, and by putting rosin on that, I can take and set the side of that pick on the string and just
vibrate or shake my hand like this and get a sustained note. It's kind of like a tiny bow, and I can sit there and do this little up and down vibrato thing like they do, like the violin, like the Hawaiian ukulele players do. I'm just shaking my hand, and I can use that little piece of the pick as a little tiny bow, and I can sit and bow very lightly. And again, that's a nice way to practice my fingering for my left hand. So anyway, I hope that's some advice to help you with the study of your violin. Don't be afraid to use the pick a lot and just hold it in your lap like a guitar. It's a good way to see what your left hand is doing and to get those distances right for the notes and get it going. The next video I do for you is I'll be in the shop, and I'll get out a blackboard and I'll show you what are called tetrachords. Tetrachords are just 4 notes of whole steps and half step combinations, which are used to build all the scales. The tetrachord you've been using is half step, and then using a minor third, and then doing another half step, moving to the next string where you're a fifth higher than the root, and then doing half step, a minor third, and half step again. And that was the scale that you were playing in your first video. For the major scale, what we do is a whole step, half step with those 3 fingers. The index finger is about an inch and a half to 2 inches from the nut, and then another inch and a half to 2 inches for the middle finger, and then the ring finger is almost right next to, it's half that distance, so it's almost right next to the middle finger, and that gives you the what's called a 1/4 tetrachord, which is the major scale. And then you move over to the next string and do the exact same fingering pattern. So you'll get a 1, 2, 3, 4. So whole step, half step. Move to the next string, which is 5. Whole step to 6, whole step to 7, and then half step again. So using the same fingering pattern where you're going whole step, half step. So it'll look kind of like this. These 2 fingers will be right next to each other, this finger here, and the distance between these 2 fingers will be the same as from the index finger to the nut. And that gives you your whole step, half step, or 1, 2, 3. Then on the next string, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1. Okay? So try that major scale. As you know, in the Western tradition, most of the jazz songs and most of the sing around the campfire songs and most of the sing-along songs here in the West and in the German tradition and the Irish, British tradition are all based on the major scale. For the minor scale, what they do is the ring finger either is right next to the middle finger, or it likes to sit over here next to the pinky, and they call this high and low. So in some fiddle books they'll say use a high finger, they mean the ring finger is like this to get the major scale, and then using a low finger where you're in first position, and you put your finger anywhere on the string, and that would be 1, whole step with this finger, whole step with that finger, and half step with that finger, and then that there, 1, 2, 3, 4, move over to the next string, 1, 2, 3, 4, and that's called first position fingering, where you're using all 4 of the fingers. If you use the nut as the number 1, you only need 3 fingers, so you use this position where the ring finger is what they call high. And if you're going from any other place on the violin, you're going to use the index finger for your number 1, and then what you're going to do is use what's called the low position, where that ring finger is down there, and then you get your whole steps, whole step, half step, and that'll give you 1, 2, 3, 4, next 5, 6, 7, 8. And for minor, of course, it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4. So again, you use a high finger and all 4 fingers in first position fingering to get the minor scale. The first string on the minor scale is 1 fingering pattern, or 1 tetrachord. The second string would be a different tetrachord. You'll find only in the major scale is the fingering pattern the same, the tetrachord is the same for both the first string and the second string. Now naturally, any open string that you're playing becomes 1, and you use that string and the string above it to create your
your first octave of your major scale, and then the fingerings will change on the other strings above or below that. If you're using first position, where you're starting with the index finger anywhere on the violin, then you're using all 4 of those fingers to play that 1/4 tetrachord, moving to the next string, playing the 1/4 tetrachord, and getting your major scale. And of course, the fingering patterns will change for the strings above that or for the strings below that. We'll talk about the tetrachords, and I'll draw them on the board for you in the next one. But usually any scale, no matter what it is used generally 2 tetrachords. The first tetrachord in the major scale is 1, 2, 3, 4, whole step, half step. The second tetrachord is called a 2/5 tetrachord, and so it'd be like playing the first 4 notes of the Dorian mode. 2, which is whole step, 2 to 3, 3 to 4 becomes the half step, 4 to 5 becomes a whole step. So whole step, whole step is the 2/5 tetrachord. The 3/6 tetrachord is starting with a half step, whole step, whole step. That's the 3/6 tetrachord. And then what's called the 4/7 tetrachord, in which there are no half steps at all. It's all whole steps, whole step, whole step, whole step. And those are the 4 basic tetrachords that are used to create most of the scales in music. So anyway, I've said a lot, talked fast, getting a little dizzy going around in a circle here. Let's do it one more time, kind of fast. Get faster. And from Golden Gate Park, in front of the Conservatory of Flowers, see you later. Namaste.